We've always looked at this podcast as a community project, and collaboration has been key. So working with HESCO, Bespoke Digital, all our guests and the people behind the scenes making it happen, we'd just like to say a big thank you. On to the episode. My name is Michael Coates. I'm a former firefighter, but I'm also a former soldier. And it's the stories from the individuals within this military community that I'm desperate to document. Our next guest was an officer with a parachute regiment. This episode looks at leadership, community and adventure, and why mental fitness and resilience plays such an important part. From the battlefields of Afghanistan to walking the Nile, episode 13, Levison Wood, this is Declassified. Born in Staffordshire in 1982, what was childhood like, mate?
I had a good childhood, actually. I grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, pretty much working class family. My parents were both teachers, but they didn't have much money to put together. And but you know what, I loved it. I loved growing up in Stoke, and that because they were teachers, I think they always encouraged me to be curious and to be adventurous. My dad was in the TA back then, and I remember sort of always wanting to do something similar. So that kind of inspired me to join the army from quite a young age. My granddad was in the war, and so I grew up with a lot of military stories.
Because you're not that far away from the peaks, are you?
No, it's close. Yeah. So I did when I was a teenager, I did my DFE and all that stuff, and basically, probably my first expedition was in the Peak District.
Mm-hmm. And then taking away the expeditions, just as a kid in general, because that time in the 80s, because I was a year after you, born a year after you, and growing up and just being out and about all the time, and especially with parents that allowing you to do that kind of thing.
Yeah,
it is a kind of freeing environment, really, isn't it? To be able to go and make the mistake and take the risk and then learn from that risk. Was that what it was like then? Just out and about doing that?
Yeah, I think what I grew up, in a sort of on the outskirts of a city, but also close enough to the countryside to go out and play in the woods, get into lots of trouble. And as kids, we did. But that was that was the real education. Going out and making mistakes, getting into trouble, and sometimes getting away with it, sometimes not. But I think that it's an important thing, and risk is something that I think about a lot because it's kind of my job these days.
Yeah.
I think it's something we don't do enough of. We're always quite risk averse today in this day and age. When actually we should encourage people to take risks, because when you take risks, that's how you develop, that's how you grow. Especially
it's not a bad thing either, is it? Taking risk is not a bad thing.
No.
As long as it's calculated. And if you learn from a young age, to do that, then actually you just get better and better and better at doing it.
Totally.
And I'm finding that now. I've got little ones, and letting them, they call it risky play, where you don't mollycoddle them, you let them make the mistake and go out there and do it. So we go through school and then end up at uni, and that's when you kind of started touching the military side of things, didn't you?
Yeah, so I did the usual sort of gap year before uni, went travelling, but really my heart by then was already set on joining the army. So when I went to uni, I joined the OTC, which is the Officer Training Corps, which, to be honest, was mainly a sort of bit of a drinking club, but at the same time, you learn the basic skills, you go on exercise, you go and get cold, wet and miserable out in the woods.
Are you a reservist? Are you classed as a reservist?
You're classed as a reservist, yeah. But you're not deployable as a student. But it's good preparation for if you're going to go on to join the army. It was very good.
And what did you study?
History.
Is that beneficial now?
I'm probably one of the few people who studied history and actually got to use it later. It's you learn how to write essays, you learn how to analyse stuff, you read lots of books, and actually a big part of my job now as a writer is going to places where there's a big historical legacy. And actually the way I choose my expeditions really is it tends to be places that I studied way back when, and whether that's the history of exploration or history of particular regions. So that's where I got my education. Really was history, and I actually specialised in travel writing. So it all made sense in the end.
Yeah, everyone's saying, "What's he doing? What's he doing going to uni?" But actually, it's paying dividends now. You So did you leave in 2005 then, uni?
Left in 2004, but then took another year travelling.
Where'd you go there?
So I hitchhiked because I was at uni in Nottingham. I hitchhiked from Nottingham all the way to India. And
I thought you were going to say like Brighton.
No, all the way to India. It took 5 months. And I literally did it I had 750 quid. And I had to get home with that as well. That's literally my parents thought I was
750 quid.
Yeah, for 5 months. My mum thought I was on holiday in Greece, and I put my thumb up at Grantham Services on the A1, and got down to Dover, and then that was it. Overland all the way.
Did you know where you was going?
Yeah. No, I wanted to get to India. That was my plan. Yeah, it was a rough plan, but
yeah.
But I went through Russia. I went through the Caucasus. I went through Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, over the Khyber Pass. So I'd actually, before I joined the army, I'd already been to Afghanistan as a hitchhiker.
What, in 2004?
2004.
You was in Afghanistan as a hitchhiker.
Yeah.
Did you say you managed risk earlier on?
Well, I was a bit more reckless in those days, but it was, again, that was like, it taught me a lot of things. I did it on my own. And it was great fun. I was looked after by all sorts of people. I ended up spending a week with a load of opium smuggling mujahideen in Afghanistan. Probably the same people that were shooting at me a few years later.
Why was that? Why when you go into these places, that's what it seems anyway from the outside. We're not onto it yet, but we'll cover it now. Why are people like that when they've got very little and they are, smuggling things like opium? They're not doing it for a laugh. They're doing it to feed their families or whatever. Why are they so welcoming?
I think what it is if you're on your own, if you're vulnerable, which I was. I was a 22-year-old lad. People kind of feel sorry for you. People tend to look after you. You don't come across as a threat. I wasn't armed. I was trying to blend in. And when you tell people what you're doing, they think, bloody hell, what are you up to? You idiot. Let me look after you. And everybody did that. So I was taken in by all sorts of people. And I think that's the thing. If you it's a bit of an old cliche, but if you come in peace and you're sort of there trying to learn about them and their culture and their families and everything else, then people tend to be, even if they're technically the bad guys, which I've spent a lot of time with people who are technically the bad guys. Actually, I personally, never really felt in danger. I mean, there were certainly dangerous situations, but it wasn't. Nobody ever came up to me and said, "I'm going to kill you."
Really, It's funny, isn't it? There's that perception and. The perception, like you just said then, like the bad guy perception, where we think someone is the bad guy and where like the cowboys and Indians kind of scenario. I used to mentor teenage lads with autism. Kind of just go in and like teach them how to shave or whatever, or fix a tyre of a bike or whatnot. And one of the guys, or one of the lads who's like 14, really switched on, and he was doing an essay on heroes, and he was like, it was like you had to put a collage of different faces, and one of them was Osama bin Laden on the collage, and there was like Bob Marley and Martin Luther King and all this. And I was like, oh, why? I was a bit taken back, and I was like, why is he on there? And he was like, oh, well, to some people, he's a hero. And I was like, well, yeah, you're right. And it just popped into my head then when you said that, where it's that perception of
people like to categorise. I think it's the easy way out, isn't it? By putting people into pigeonholes, good guys, bad guys, and that's what I found everywhere I've been on these journeys, is that it's not that simple. There's a lot of middle ground. It's not as black and white as we think. But for the sake of ease, a lot of people just fall into this is good versus bad, and I think that's just the way we are cultured. I mean, it's kind of, as humans, we like a simple narrative. We like to form tribes, we like to form cliques, and it's us versus them. But I think that what I'm trying to do with my work is to hopefully break down some of those stereotypes.
No, mate, you do it really well. But yeah, so you get back. Was it always on your mind then when you was travelling? 'Cause you said it a second ago. You always on your mind that you're going to go to Sandhurst.
Yeah, even then, even when I was sort of, being a bit of a hippie, traipsing across the mountains and spending time in India, I kind of knew that when I got back from that trip, I'd join the army. So in 2005, I went to Sandhurst. Didn't really know who I was going to join. I sort of thought about the infantry. I thought about the intelligence corps. But I thought, I'll go and see what I enjoy. And Sandhurst, after being in the OTC, which you already sort of learn the basic skills, it was kind of like going back to basics. So, Sandhurst really does break you down. That's the plan, is they sort of they sort of crush you and then build you back up again. And it had its ups and downs. I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy all of it. Some of it was good. But, by the time I finished, I felt ready to get stuck in.
So how does it work then? So you joined the Parachute Regiment.
Yeah.
Do you know that's what you're joining towards the end of Sandhurst?
Towards the end, yeah. In the sort of final term, you go for interviews and you kind of have to make your decision. And it usually comes between two choices. And for me, it ended up being between the Parachute Regiment and the Intelligence Corps. Yeah. Both quite different. Yeah. But, it was because I ended up doing boxing at Sandhurst. And my original choice was the Staffordshire Regiment, just because it was my local regiment. But I ended up boxing, and at Sandhurst it's quite a big event. You train all term, you train for like 14 weeks, and if you're good enough, you get selected. And there's quite stiff competition to be chosen for the final fight night. So I felt really good that I'd been chosen. Boxed in front of about 1,000 people, maybe more, 1,500 people. And won my fight, and it was amazing. And actually, it was the para-regimental rep approached me that night and said, well, who you joining? I said, the Staffords. He was like, no, you're not. You're coming into the Paras. So the next morning at 6 o'clock, with a bit of a hangover, I was sat there writing an essay and doing my interviews for all the Paras. And luckily, I got in. And
what does it take then to be? Because from the outside in, especially with the officer thing, what does it take then to be part of that?
Well, to be honest, from the outset, it was quite intimidating. I never went into the army thinking I've got to join the Paras. A lot of the Paras do, because it's that for them. It's Paras or nothing. For me, it wasn't quite that simple. I just wanted to be in the army. That was my priority. So when this guy came up and said, come and join the Paras, I thought, I questioned myself: am I good enough? Am I fit enough? All the rest of it. But then he said, look, if you can box in front of 1,000 people and win, that's it. You're good enough for the Paras. So I went through the process, and it was hard work, especially when you do the platoon commander's battle course in Brecon. You're expected as a para. By then, you're wearing the para beret, even though you haven't sort of passed P company. You've got a lot to live up to. You've got to go and be fitter than everyone else. You've got to be better at map reading than everyone else. You're expected, because people have got certain expectations about the Paras. You kind of have to live up to it.
So when you leave Sandhurst, you then go to Brecon.
Yeah, and then you do P company.
Do P company after?
Yeah, so you're wearing your beret without having earned it, which is quite a precarious position to be in. Yeah.
Did it feel weird then that period of time?
Of course it did. Yeah, because you've got 3 months where you're like, you still haven't got, you haven't got your wings on or anything like that.
Yeah. Did you come across to the Paras then when you had the beret on?
You get absolutely beasted. Yeah.
Awkward. Yeah.
But then when you go and there were people that did that, then went and did P company and failed P company.
That's what I was thinking then when you said it.
It happens. Yeah, it happens.
We said there what it takes to deal with it, and I really want to kind of delve into the kind of mental fitness and mental resilience side of it with you, because it's for going away, even like when you were 22, going away for long periods of time, you've got to have resilience. You've got to have like that mental fitness as well as the physical side of things. And I don't know the answer to this, but I want you to say it. Like, joining something like the Parachute Regiment, joining the British Army, especially with the officer side of things, makes you more mental resilient, more mentally fit to deal with situations. And are you finding that, well, then and now as well? Are you finding it set you up?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now were it not for being in the army, particularly the Paras, I think, because it just gave me the confidence, it gave me the confidence to just crack on and do what I'm doing now. And actually, if I hadn't have had that on my sort of CV almost, not that I've ever done a proper CV, but if people hadn't have looked at me when I'm and said, oh, that guy was in the Paras, because it counts for a lot. It counts just in the army. If that guy was in the army, it suddenly makes you to not civilians almost like a bit of a superhero that can almost do anything, and you have to kind of live up to that, and it gives you this sort of free pass in a lot of ways, and it certainly enabled me to do this career that I'm doing now, because you might not necessarily have the right qualifications or training, but ultimately if you've done that, if you achieve that counts for a lot, and it's something that people can't take away from you.
I think it's your approach as well, and the influence you can create yourself, and I'll get onto it in a little while, but it's using it right, and not expecting, and actually expecting nothing in return, and going out there and proving it to yourself, and really, like you say, no one's an overnight success. Like, you've got to really earn after. But before that, and it's something, we've had a conversation before, and you got some news in 2006, so you just passed out. You got some news about a good friend of yours who you was at uni with.
Yeah.
And it wasn't great. I mean, and he'd been suffering from depression, and he took his own life.
Yeah.
And we talk about mental resilience, and what was it like at that point for you?
Yeah, so basically my mate Alex, we were housemates at university. He was also in the OTC. In fact, he was an army doctor, so he got the bursary. So he was had a blossoming career ahead of him, and he was on his first job as a junior doctor, and we don't know what happened because I was at Sandhurst, so I was kind of out of the loop a bit for a while, but his mum actually got in touch, which was quite strange. So you need to come and see Alex, and I thought this is a bit strange. So I went to see Alex, and he just didn't look himself, and he was obviously depressed, and but at that age, we were sort of 21, 22, and didn't really know what to make of it all. And yeah, literally the weekend after, we got a phone call saying that he'd killed himself, which was an enormous blow. This guy who was one of my best mates. We'd been on all sorts of adventures together. We'd hitchhiked around the Middle East together the summer before, and then suddenly he was dead. And so when something like that happens, it really brings life into a sharp perspective, and you think, God, he was fine a few months ago. He was absolutely fine, and then that happens, and it changes everything.
It's heartbreaking, especially so young and such promise. Did you? I mean, I don't want to put words into your mouth, and you can just brush me off. But did you feel any guilt towards that because you'd been with him the week before?
Well, that was it. I mean, I often wonder, is there anything I could have done?
Yeah.
But as a 20, I think I was 22 or 23 at the time. You don't know. You certainly don't expect that. We thought I was just having a bit of a downer. And, I remember the last time I saw him, he sort of said, "Don't worry, I'm fine." But there was something in his voice that made me think, clearly he's not fine. And obviously now, if I ever encounter somebody like that, then I'd do something about it. And that's why it's really important to raise these issues, because so that you can identify when somebody's, having problems and needs help.
Do we know why? Why was?
No, we never really found out. There was no. I mean, clearly there was an element of depression there, but there was no history of that.
Yeah.
Not something we'd ever seen before. Suddenly he went just completely changed, and was down, really down in the dumps. Physically, he looked, his face was gaunt, and he just looked dishevelled, and those are the signs that I wish I'd known at the time that really meant that. But even then, he was at home with his mum the day it happened. She was there, which is, you can only imagine.
The suicide, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but suicide really affects just more than just the individual. And Sean Jones, who was episode 8, I know you don't know Sean, but he planned his suicide a couple of times, from PTSD and whatnot. And he posted a video a couple of months ago, and he basically said that it's selfish to kill yourself because you just pass on the hurt to someone else, and that some people else is their friends and certainly their family, and especially if the parents are finding the child horrendous situation to be in, and just by talking about it, and especially about and that's why it's so important that we document these stories, and not so much yours in that respect, but people like Sean's and all the rest of it, and say, just speak about and get help, and don't hold it, whether it's you're getting bullied at school or you're at university and the press is too much. These narratives transcend through, and I think it always boils down to that initial conversation and getting it out, and because if he'd have spoke to you and told you, I'm suicidal, the outcome may have been different. I just want to move us a few more years now, and we're now on Op Herrick in Afghanistan. So you deploy with what regiment was you?
I was 3 Para.
Yeah. So you're with 3 Para in 2008. How was that as a tour goes?
After all the training that you go through, and hearing the stories, because I joined the battalion just as they got back from Herrick 6. So, these were some of the heaviest fighting in recent decades. And so to join a battalion of veterans who've been involved in, a lot of fighting as a young officer, where you're suddenly the bloke in charge, is like, bloody hell, this is intimidating to say the least. I mean, literally the first time I met my platoon, I was introduced to the blokes who were just, they weren't interested in me in the slightest. And I was like, introduced to one of my corporals, Corporal Crabtree, and he said, "Sir, can I tell you a joke?" I was like, "Yeah, of course you can." He's like, "How many Sangin veterans does it take to change a light bulb?" I was like, "I don't know, you tell me, how many Sangin veterans doesn't it take to change a light bulb?" And he said, "Well, of course you wouldn't know, sir. You weren't effing there." And so that was the start of it,
Yeah.
But you kind of have to go in there as a young 23-year-old platoon commander, and suddenly you're responsible. I mean, you don't go in there guns blazing, bossing people around, because you're going to get filled in pretty quickly. But you're still responsible. You're still the guy that makes the decisions, the guy that has to go to all the meetings, the guy that does all the welfare, all the G1 stuff, and so you have to have you have to take all that, take those knockbacks, and just build on it. And so that was a pretty quick learning curve. So, but actually, it was another 18 months before we deployed to Afghanistan. So by then, actually, there was a big turnover of the blokes. So by the time that we did deploy, I was basically the only one left. So I was like the senior member of the platoon. So there was a lot of new recruits that had come in. So actually, it wasn't really an issue when I deployed, and I felt ready for it then, because I'd heard all the stories, we'd done all the training, we did loads of build-up training. So by the time I got to Afghanistan, I was very, very keen and looking forward to a good tour. And actually, the job that we were doing was actually really interesting. So we were on the Southern Regional Command, sort of basically a rapid response group. So we were sort of ready to deploy, usually in helicopters, at a moment's notice, to if there was a crisis, or doing raids, doing snatches, doing all that sort of stuff. So we weren't in one of the FOBs stuck for 6 months in one place, So we were bouncing around. So it was quite varied, quite interesting. Sometimes it was stabilisation, peace support stuff. So we were like building police stations. Sometimes it was going in, for basically raids and combat operations. So it was a nice mix.
Dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, we got in quite a few fights. Got ambushed a few times. My vehicle got blown up a couple of times. Luckily not when I was...
My vehicle got blown up a couple of times.
Well, luckily I wasn't in it at the time.
Oh, right.
There was one incident though that I will sort of say, which there was a big sort of day. We had a good 10-hour battle. We'd gone to try and capture this Taliban bomb maker, and we'd been dropped off by the helicopters. He wasn't anywhere to be found, but obviously his henchmen were, and we basically ended up having this scrap which lasted for about 10 hours. And there was one moment where I did come very close, where we were sort of in this village in a very narrow, in Afghanistan, the sort of very narrow alleyways that you get with the high walls, walking down one of these alleyways with an irrigation ditch on one side, and then about 10 feet away, I just saw this AK-47 pop over the wall, aiming straight at me, unleashed an entire magazine, and we were pretty condensed, tightly packed in this alleyway, and goodness knows how nobody got hit. So it was just a shoot and run. But as soon as we heard this going off, we all jumped into the ditch to take cover. And then looking down into the ditch, there's a reason that he'd done this Taliban. Literally right between my legs there was a landmine. So the idea was he was trying to get us to jump in the ditch and blow ourselves up. But I was lucky because it was about 2 inches away from my feet. So that was one close call. And then another one was one of our vehicles, one of the Viking vehicles, got blown up on top of a hilltop just near to Greshk. And basically my platoon was sent to go and rescue the guys. We didn't know what happened. We just, it's a couple of miles away. Got up there, and luckily those guys were in a Wimmick. They'd all been blown clear of the vehicle inside a minefield. So we had to drive into the minefield, get these guys, put them in a new vehicle, but obviously it was a minefield, so we had to kind of do a 3-point turn out of the minefield. So by the time we'd done this, the guys that had just been blown up once were basically, by the time we'd done the 3-point turn, they were the lead vehicle again. So as we were driving off, they hit another mine. The vehicle went up again, So the same three guys have been blown up twice now in the space of half an hour.
Uninjured?
Yeah, they're fine. It's absolutely, crazy. But we then had to sort of rescue them again. And at this time, I thought, I need to step up to the sort of plate a bit here and show a bit of leadership. So I sort of got out and literally with a bayonet had to sort of, jab around in the dust to make sure that the path was clear. Anyway, we got these guys out. We drove them out of the minefield and dropped them off at the sort of bottom of the hill. But then we were sort of ordered to go back and properly destroy the vehicles so that the Taliban couldn't take the radios and all the other bits and pieces. So I had to send my car back up with some of the guys to go and blow it up. And literally as the car went off, I was staying with the guys who had just been rescued, and literally as my vehicle went up, that one blew up as well.
Holy shit!
Yeah, but luckily everyone was fine. The driver was fine, but my seat where I was sitting was just a gaping big hole.
Joke.
So thank goodness I wasn't in it. Yeah,
mate, they are vile explosives and mines and whatnot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned it there, mate. What is leadership? How do you define it? You just said then, getting on your hands and knees in a minefield with your bayonet, prodding for mines is no easy feat. It's not straightforward. And
I think it's leadership is about just doing the right thing and leading, and setting an example. Doing, if you've got blokes under you, you need to be able to do that job yourself. Whatever you ask somebody to do for you, you need to be able to do that job yourself and be very good at it, because nobody's going to respect you if you're telling people what to do if you haven't done it yourself or if you're not willing to do it yourself. So I think it's important that as a leader, you really lead by example. I think that's the most important thing, and that really is born out of having the courage to do what's right.
Yeah, good values and living with them. Really good, mate. 2010, you left. You decided to leave. Why? Because at this point you'd call it a good operator, in the infantry, and the powers like you were good. Was you a captain at this point?
I was a captain then, yeah. The honest answer is that I'd been to Afghanistan. It was only a short tour. That was it. And then my next job was as an infantry training depot up in Catterick. I was an instructor. Wasn't really why I joined the army. By then I was a bit disillusioned. I would have, to be honest, it might sound a bit odd, but I would have happily stayed in Afghanistan for another couple of years. I enjoyed the job there, despite the dangers. That's what I signed up for, and I would have happily gone to another battalion and deployed again. I'd have gone out for another 6 months, but instead I was doing a job that, whilst important, I didn't really enjoy that much, and I kind of realised at that stage that my life wasn't my own, and I didn't want to sort of necessarily just be at the whim of somebody deciding where my posting was going to be. So I'd always valued my freedom, and I'd always enjoyed travelling, and I was very grateful for what the army had given me. But I thought there's different ways to skin the cat, and actually I decided that I needed some time to just do my own thing. So I left without much of a plan. The other reason as well, I was going to go on SAS selection at that stage, but ended up breaking my leg just before the course had started, which is my own fault. I shouldn't have been doing rodeo in Mexico. But
for another podcast,
we'll talk about that story another time. But anyway, so I couldn't go on selection. So by then I was ready to leave, basically. So I left without a great plan other than I'm going to carry on travelling, and I wanted a bit of a creative outlet. So I thought, why not go and write books, take photographs, and see if I can make it into a sort of.
Oh, that was the plan, was it?
Yeah,
a very loose plan.
A very loose plan. Obviously, for a good few years, I didn't make a single penny on the whole thing, and I was living on floors. I had nowhere to live. I was basically homeless for 3 years. Constantly either travelling or basically. What was you doing? What was you actually doing then in them 3 years? What was the? So I spent like a few months working for a charity out in Africa.
Okay.
I set up a little business doing expeditions as a guide. So I'd basically go away for a couple of weeks guiding, come back to London for a few weeks, but had nowhere to stay. So I was just dossing on mates' sofas and floors and a few, even a few benches now and again, which was quite interesting. Yeah, living on a very small budget because I didn't have any money at all, and but you know what, they were challenging times, but also really, really important times because it gave me the drive and the hunger to want to make a success of it and not turn back and do something useful and interesting. And it really drove me to just put all my eggs in one basket and take a risk.
And just really niche down in that.
Yeah.
And not mess about with anything else.
And I was said, right,
cash.
I wrote, no, exactly. And, you know, I was kind of headhunted by, you know, they were all sleeping on benches and I was headhunted by Barclays to go and work for them. I thought, I can't do it. I just can't do it. So now I sort of turned the money down and went for it and spent 3 years just doing these little trips. But by doing that, it gave me a really good portfolio and an experience, so that when I had this idea to, you know, go and walk the Nile, which really for me was the sort of my big break that changed everything for me, I could say with conviction that I put in the hard yards, and it wasn't an overnight success. It was years and years of living tough.
Yeah. And prepared to do it for free as well, you know, going away and people just, you know, when lads get out, I'll do a few talks like to people who are transitioning, and the one thing I'll always say is like don't seek the cash, just go for your vision, like what do you want to achieve, who do you want to work with, and even in some cases just go and do it for free, and that's like
do what you enjoy, do what you're good at, and the money will come later.
Yeah, perfect. And then so we did get tracks. So let's move to the Nile. That was 2014, was it?
2013 to 14. It was 9 months. Yeah.
Yeah. 750 quid?
No, it was a bit more than that this time round. By then, you know, it was an idea. I wanted to write a book. The TV actually came as a sort of bit of a byproduct, actually, and I was lucky to get that. Although even there was nothing guaranteed it until about a month before I set off. So, I was putting big risk. I was going to pay for it myself, and even though I didn't have any money, I was trying to get sponsors. Took 2 years, didn't get any sponsors. I was meant to actually be doing it with another guy, and he dropped out a couple of months before we set off. He got cold feet, so that by the time I set off, you know, everyone was saying, "Not a chance. This is impossible. You're going to die. You know, this is a stupid idea." But I said, you know, I was just a bit pig-headed and was like, "No, I'm doing it."
It's for those who haven't seen it, it's such, because it's what it's not. It doesn't exaggerate anything. It's not like this dramatization of travel like you'd get on some gimmicky shows. It is just you going from one place to another and the experiences that you're getting within it. Some good, some bad, but actually just almost a first-person account. Well, a first-person account of what it's going on.
I think it was an honest account of what it's like to go on a blooming long walk for 9 months through some pretty dodgy places, you know, and it was, nothing was planned, nothing was prepared. You can't really plan for 9 months of doing something like that.
How do you do it though, mate? How do you like get, you know, because it's filmed like,
well, that's it. And I bear in mind, I got no experience in using a camera at this stage. No, I was not I'm not a trained cameraman. I'd never done anything like this before. You know, it was simply a case of, right, there's a camera, point it in the right direction.
Okay.
There was a film crew that kind of came out they'd come out for a week, say, then I wouldn't see them again for 2 months, and then they'd come out again. So they came out, I think, 5 times over the space of 9 months. But for months on end, I'd just be either on my own or with a local. So it was my job to train up whichever local I was with and say, look, mate, this is a camera. You have to hold it for 5 seconds here, then different angles and all that stuff. So it was a massive learning curve for me, and whichever, you know, local tribesmen happened to be travelling with me because they loved it. And but, you know, it's not rocket science. You learn it pretty quickly, so that by the end of it, when we got back and we were still in one piece just about, you know, I was quite excited but also nervous because it took another 3 months before it went on the telly. Anything could have happened in that 3 months to change, you know.
So you didn't get a check then? You didn't get a big check?
Not until the end. No. Not until the end.
Until
it went on TV, yeah.
Oh, really?
Because, I mean, they could have bumped it. They could have... it could have gone out on a Tuesday night at 3 a.m. and nobody would have watched it. You know, so it all really rested on the good luck that I had, the fact that it went out on primetime TV, and, you know, lots of people watched it.
Yeah. It is good, mate. How many episodes was it, that first one?
That one was only 4. Could have been a lot longer.
Does that piss you off? Because I always think, like, you've got 9 months of you can do it, and then
We
it's
had something like
condensed into
1,000
4.
hours of footage, which they turned into 4 hours of TV. I mean, I guess for them, I was an unknown quantity. I'd never been on telly before.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to push their luck by saying, right, we'll do 6 hours, which it could have been easily. But so they only went for 4. So there's the amount that got cut out. You can only imagine, you know. So
you know, when you said you had film crews coming out, who was them? What company were they coming out to?
So the production company that sort of were helping me with it, they sent people out. You know, there was a small team, you know, of these guys who were, you know, they had the experience with cameras. So when they came out, it was only 2-3 guys, you know, so it wasn't like a big van or 3 vans or anything like that. It was literally a couple of guys, some small cameras, but, you know, the good quality footage that you need to make a TV program.
And that first one, what was the kind of highlights of that?
I think for me it was just, I mean, it was a big slog. I have to say, you know, I probably enjoyed about 30% of it. The other 70% was bloody hard work, boring, monotonous, you know, horrible. And there were some real low points. But in terms of the high points, I think, you know what, I made some amazing friends. I had a great guide, Boston, who was this like real character, Congolese rebel soldier who just came with me for 5 months. Going to some of the most spectacular landscapes in the world, you know, going through Uganda, Rwanda, Sudan, you know, these amazing places that I'd, you know, studied, and yet going there on foot, travelling entirely at the mercy of locals, was just such an amazing experience.
I remember watching it. I didn't know anything about you at the time. I watched it. I think I must have watched it first time round. Is when you was in South Sudan.
Yeah.
And was you on top of a building?
We got caught up there in the Civil War. Yeah.
That was that was a crazy, you know, the way you filmed it, because they were coming in, weren't they, to the village?
Well, it was literally just me and my mate, and that was
War.
it. And we were surrounded by these rebels. There was rockets going off. There was mortars coming in. It was just me with a camera. Yeah.
I mean, it's you're shitting yourself.
I was, but at the same time, I know it sounds a bit bizarre. Like, if you're walking for weeks and nothing happens, you kind of want stuff like that to happen because you're so bored. So actually, you know, it was quite an exciting time. Yeah,
we got excitement. We had tragedy on that expedition as well.
Yeah.
I'll overview it, and then you just chip in if I'm getting it wrong. So Matthew Powell was a journalist, came out with you to document some of the journey. Was overcome with heat stroke. You then did everything that you should have done in that situation. It was a weird and quite you were miles from anywhere. You did everything right, tried cooling his body temperature, tried hydrating him, got him under cover. He sadly died. Did you ever think it was going to end?
I mean, that was, you know, that's got to be one of the worst days of my entire life. You know, Matt had come all the way from New York. He was only meant to be with us for a few days. And sadly, they were his last 3 days. He came out, it was fine for a couple of days, really enjoying the walk. And then on the third day, you know, it wasn't any hotter or anything like that than the other days. He just suddenly said, I'm feeling a bit tired. Can we slow down? I was like, yeah, of course. We stopped under a tree, and he basically just almost just fell asleep, and tried to revive him. We tried to get him rescued. We tried to get a helicopter, but we were miles from anywhere. It was a very remote area, and I mean, I'll spare you the details, but it was horrific, and dealing with the aftermath of that was horrific as well. Yeah.
Because your walk, it's meant to be a real positive experience. Good or bad, but we don't expect that to happen.
No, I mean, of course.
And this is the footage of you when you come back, and it's a little bit darker, and all you say is, "Oh, Matt's just died," and you can just see it, mate. It's just to have it documented like that as well, and so emotional to watch that kind of thing, and you can see you're doing everything. And it's kind of, what's the word? It's not frantic. It's you're trying to do everything you possibly can to keep him and to help him out, and it just went so quick. Was the daft question, mate? We can edit it out if you want. But did you do CPR on him?
Yeah, I did CPR. But by then it was too late. I was on the phone on the one hand. I literally had two phones on the go. I had a satellite phone calling in, trying to get a helicopter in. On the phone I was on the phone to a doctor, like talking me through what to do. And actually, the doctor was one of my mates. Actually, he was telling me, he's like, "Look, I know I was telling you what to do, but when you said his temperature, he said I knew it was already too late because his body temperature had reached such a critical point that there was no going back from that." So yeah, it was an awful situation to be in. Made worse by the fact that when he did pass away, you're suddenly faced with a completely alien. What on earth do you do in that situation? It wasn't me, but Jason, his mate, who was travelling with him, he was the photographer. He had to phone his wife and tell him what happened.
Oh, he was married?
Yeah. Phone his wife. We then had to carry the body out. We then had to organise with the local police a repatriation. We had to organise a bit of an impromptu cremation. I mean, the whole thing was just awful.
We'll move us on, mate. So you got back, an adventure then. And even though we've got these dark times, you're still got to live and get your what you're all about, and that is that adventure now, and going and exploring and doing all that good stuff. You then decided to walk the Himalayas. Did the Nile have a big effect on how you planned for that?
Yeah, so in spite of all the setbacks that I'd had on the Nile, I knew I had to carry on. So I did, and luckily it was a success. And it inspired me to carry on. And the feedback that I got, not just from the TV but from writing the book and so on, was you got to keep doing this. So I did. So I thought, why not go and take that concept of travelling on foot, along a geographical feature, whether that's a river or a mountain range, and meet people along the way that tell the story of that region through their own words, and that was the idea. So I did, and thought, why not go to the Himalayas? This is a place that started in Afghanistan. It was a country that was close to my heart. It was basically a similar route that I'd taken when I hitchhiked to India anyway, through the mountains. And again, that did really well as well. And by that time, of course, it was becoming more successful. And for me, as to be able to sustain it as an actual proper career and a lifestyle meant that, I'd suddenly was earning money for the first time in 3 years, so it was great. So it really did inspire me to carry on and to make a success of it. And actually the best bit though wasn't just the sort of the reward of achieving these expeditions and writing about it and whatnot. It was the feedback, because you suddenly have a big following, and you suddenly start getting hundreds, if not thousands, of people contacting you, which can be quite overwhelming to start with. But it was the in between all of the the fan mail, I suppose, to whatever you want to call it, was actually you'd suddenly get a letter. I mean, one of the best bits was I got a letter from the head of Save the Children saying, "We've been trying to put South Sudan on the map for 25 years. You did it on one primetime TV show." And he said the amount of donations that came in as a result of seeing that one clip on TV had made so many big changes. And you get letters from people who've quit their jobs and set up a clinic in Nepal, or volunteered, and or people. I mean, I got a message from one lady saying that watching the programs had inspired her to fight cancer, and she got through it. And it's weird when you hear that, because you think you can't be inspired to it's not going to save somebody from cancer just by watching a show. But for some people, if that's all that it takes for them to strive on, then it really makes me feel humble. And thought, I've got to stick at this.
It's that hope, isn't it? Do you know, like when you see someone doing something, you think, oh, you know what, like I could do, that's possible. People do this stuff, and he's just walking around with his bag over his shoulder. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's at the end of the day, however you want to dress it up. I'm not doing anything superhuman. It's literally just a walk that anyone can do.
Yeah. Any because like we've done Himalayas. I say I'll just brush over it then. 9 months of graft. We've just done the Himalayas, 4-part special.
Yeah, that was 5, but yeah.
Yeah, sorry, 5-part special. You're getting better. It's getting better. America's was next.
Yep.
This was shorter, wasn't it, in mileage wise?
It was about 1,800 miles, I think. Yeah, in total. So it's still about. It was still 6 months though, because you go through jungle a lot of the time.
Yeah.
That was, again, the same concept. It was going to a region that I kind of knew a bit about. Not less, I mean, I knew more about Africa and Asia, but for me, Central America was a place that, again, was close to my heart. It was when I first left the army, I actually went and lived in Mexico for a few months to learn photography. And I actually met this photographer guy, Alberto, who, again, was just really generous, looked after me. So I roped him into it, and he became my guide, and we did the whole thing together. So that was amazing. It was really good fun as well. It was, out of all the expeditions that I've done, if you've got somebody, a travel companion, who's just really funny, we never argued once. We just had such a good time that it was just a really good, fun expedition. And I'll look fondly back on that one.
Yeah, and what are the biggest changes then? Not the biggest changes, but what's the differences then between? Because we've done Africa, then Asia,
yeah,
and then the Americas, like South America.
Yeah.
Do we still get the same? Like we said earlier on about being vulnerable, people welcoming you in, and all the rest of it. Was it still like that?
It was. And that's, I guess, what I've realised from all these journeys is that wherever you go in the world, people are pretty similar. Obviously there's cultural differences, but people are people, and by putting yourself at risk, by making yourself vulnerable, you get so much back in return. So that's been my mantra with these expeditions, is by not taking reckless risks, but by exposing myself in some ways to the dangers. It just enables you to get so much out of it.
So yeah, you make yourself vulnerable, go with it,
yeah,
and you get so much back. What makes you happy?
It's that feeling of being vindicated when you come back in one piece, and everyone's like, "What on earth were you doing, you daft bugger?" And you're like, "Actually, you know what? It was amazing for this reason, for that reason." And you just and actually, that makes me happy, because it kind of restores your faith in humanity, because you see all the bad news on the TV, you think, oh, that place, I'm not going there, it's too dangerous. All the people there are terrorists, whatever. But when you go there and you see that they're not all terrorists, and actually they're trying to help you, or they're just trying to get on with their lives, it's like you just feel good about yourself, you feel good about the world.
Will there be a time when you're not doing this? Do you think?
It's been it's been taxing. It's been like, it's had a big impact on my private life. Having a tour mentality, we talk about that in the military, don't we? About a tour mentality. You're away. What happens on tour stays on tour, or what? Or the fact that you come back and then you're always planning for the next thing. That's kind of where my mind's been at for the past, well, I say 5 years, but the reality is I was doing it for the 3 years before that, since I left the army. And when I was in the army, it was the same sort of mentality. So actually for at least 10 years, probably 15 years, most of my adult life, I've had this tour mentality where I'm away and then I'm back and then I'm planning the next trip, then I'm away again. And that, whilst it's been an incredible adventure, isn't too healthy on, settling down or finding somebody to be in a relationship with. So it can be tough. So it takes... there's a lot of sacrifices you have to make. So I think that it depends, right? If I decide that I want to settle down, then I'm going to have to make some compromises along the way as well myself. So do I want to do this forever? I love traveling. I'd like to keep on traveling, but perhaps not in such a not such big long trips the whole time.
You've done you've almost done the hard yards now.
Yeah, especially with the latest one.
Go on.
Well, I've just got back from the Middle East, so I spent 5 months out in Arabia. That was the latest journey. The most challenging yet. I mean, that was brutal. I was out in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, Lebanon. I witnessed the final battle against ISIS. We were in the trenches. It was full on. But that's coming out soon. So, yeah, the book's out.
Is that reckless?
No, because Again, there was months and months of planning and preparation that went
Right.
into it. I didn't quite expect just how close to the front line we would get, because we were actually literally embedded with the Shia militias as they were liberating ISIS villages, tearing down the ISIS flags, and yeah.
So is it? Sorry, I know you might not want to talk about it too much. You can talk about it as much as you want, because we're doing long walks now. Oh, sorry, we've done walks, and we haven't mentioned the Russia to Iran one either. But shrugged it off. The Arabian one, was that similar then? Just a big walk?
It wasn't walking this time around. So
okay.
The Arabia one really was, I guess, the concept is the same. It's travelling around a region, but because of the distances, I mean, it's 5,000 miles through 13 countries. I'd also found that one of the problems with the walking expeditions was that there's literally, you can be walking down a road for 3 weeks and you won't see anyone, or nothing will happen. So I thought, why not for the Middle East actually travel as the locals do? So sometimes that involved on the back of a camel, travelling by donkey. Sometimes in one of those wooden dhows, the little fishing boats around the coast, or in the case of Iraq, literally hitchhiking on the back of a battle tank against ISIS, which definitely had its moments.
That's the extreme hitchhiking.
Yeah.
That's the next show, isn't it? Extreme hitchhiking. Mate, what are you it's just when you were saying stuff, this last kind of 20 minutes, you've done so much in quite a condensed period of time and seen a lot, and it always strikes me, looking from afar. We've only met recently, a few weeks ago, but looking from afar, it's like that thirst for culture and that acceptance of other people. That was one thing that really shone out at me, and it really kind of made me think, well, actually, yeah, like you said, walking through Afghanistan, yeah, not everyone's a terrorist. You know what I mean? Like, it just makes you snap out at something. But what are you most proud of with all this? Because you do some work, you're an ambassador for different organisations and charities as well. As we sit here right now, what are you most proud of?
I think it's opened so many doors that I never even thought about. And like you say, being invited to be an ambassador for veterans charities. I'm an ambassador for the Endeavour Fund, for Walking with the Wounded, the Soldiers Charity, the Ulysses Trust, and countless other charities, conservation charities, causes that I'm really interested in. And, we spoke about Alex before. His mother established a charity called Amica to sort of celebrate his life and keep his legacy going. And I'm an ambassador patron for that charity. And we've built 2 hospitals in Africa as a result. So
really?
Yeah, and it's really, that is what makes all this worthwhile. It's amazing to be a part of these great organisations, to promote causes and hopefully have a bit of a difference. And that's what I think, I feel proud about. Not the walks. Anyone could do the walks. I think it's important to use whatever you're given for, to make the best of it, really.
Yeah, I think, if people are listening and they're kind of stuck, or that they're not happy where they're going, actually just following what you're passionate about, what you said from the start, really, what you're passionate about, what you're good at, what's going to make you happy.
I think on that happiness thing, I've met all sorts of people, including some really inspirational ones, people like the Dalai Lama, and that's what I'm interested in. It's like, what makes people tick, what makes people happy? And it's a question, especially when you're walking around on your own for months on end or years on end, you have a lot of time to think about these things. And so that concept of happiness is something that I've been really exploring over the last few years. And, it's what I'm trying to, the messages that I try to bring out, not necessarily in the TV, because that really focuses on the adventure, but in the books that I write, I try to explore some of the inner journey as well, and what makes people happy around the world, and that's something that I think is really important. And the thing that I've learned is you've got to it's not selfish to make yourself happy first, because you can't help other people unless you're content yourself. So there's no point making yourself miserable if you think you're only doing that because it makes other people happy. You've got to, if you're happy, then you've got a lot more happiness to give other people. So charity begins at home. Look after yourself. make yourself happy, do what makes you happy, and in doing so, you'll have much more to give other people.
Lev, thanks so much, and we will leave it there.